Hey there, welcome to another edition of Comic Book Geezers. Today is Sunday, August the 13th. I am Pete.
And I'm Wild Bill, the Unknown Comic. How are you? Welcome back to another edition of Comic Book Geezers. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to do favorite characters. We have so many different ones. So I picked Nova, and Pete picked Luke Cage.
It's an all-Marvel day today.
Yeah.
After our last
we're trying to make a quick episode if we can. Yeah. So I'm going to kick it off with Nova. Nova was a character created by Marv Wolfman and Len Wein back in 1966. And it was in a fan magazine called Super Adventures. And it was in, about 7 years later, John Buscema tweaked the character, the artwork a little bit, and changed the costume a little bit. But Nova debuted in 1976.
So 10 years after the character
actually originated. But he finally got into his own magazine. And we have shown this before with #1 issues. This is my copy. Last in a previous episode, Pete showed his. His is a better copy of mine. But this is the first issue that kicks off Nova. And the artwork is by John Buscema, and it's Marv Wolfman's story.
The character, again, a teenage character.
And, following in the footsteps of Spider-Man, what they were doing, they were paying tribute to Stan Lee's Spider-Man, Steve Ditko. So Nova is a teenage character. His name is Richard Rider. And basically there's an alien from outer space who's dying, and he picks one human who is worthy to receive his power, which is kind of similar to the Green Lantern.
A little bit.
You didn't hear it from me.
But if I remember correctly, Richard's family played a big part in the storylines as well.
He tried to keep his identity secret from them.
Yeah.
This is the 6th issue. And then great artwork. He went 25 issues, but I'm only picking 10 issues. And I selected this one because out of all the covers, this one shows off the back of his costume.
Yeah.
Not only was he an interesting character for me, one of my favorite solo characters from Marvel Comics, but I loved his costume. I
love that villain, too. This guy with Diamond Head.
Diamond Head.
Awesome.
Diamond Head is in quite a few Novas through the 25-issue series. He keeps reoccurring.
Yep.
And this one is a cover by Jack Kirby. This is issue number 7. Again, great artwork with Nova. And he can fly, obviously. Great storyline, I thought. Interesting character. I just never understood why he didn't go more than 25 issues. And obviously it had to be sales was the answer, I guess. But with the artwork with these covers, the Sphinx was also a classic villain that Nova fought, and the Sphinx does appear in other issues of Marvel Comics later on.
And actually, if you talk to a lot of Marvel fans from that era, from the mid-late 70s, Nova's a very popular character. It's just unreal how he never
doesn't
really
make sense why he didn't catch on.
Yeah.
And they did a crossover, and this is also obviously Spider-Man. And Spider-Man is blaming Nova for the death of this man downstairs here, which I believe is his father or a family member. But this story continues in Spider-Man, I think, 167 or 161. I should have brought it, but there's a cover on a Spider-Man issue where Nova and Spider-Man are tied to an anchor, and the villain's throwing them off a ship into the water to drown both of them. They're chained to an anchor. So that's what you call a crossover, when they go from one title to another. This is another character cover that I selected to show off because it shows the Sandman, a classic villain in Marvel Comics. Fought the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk. The Sandman gets around. So they tried to bring in other characters, famous Marvel characters, into Nova, I guess, to help the sales thrive. And this cover out of the whole 25-issue run exemplifies that fact. Here you have the Hulk, Captain America, you have Iron Man, and Spider-Man, and they're all ganging up against Nova.
So based on that, this is what, issue 15?
15.
Right? And, the Sandman issue was 14. And Spider-Man 12.
Was issue 12.
So obviously, sales must have not been great for this book from the get-go, because they're really introduced. A lot of the new characters that they introduce, they try to bring their own villains into play.
And speaking of villains, the Yellow Claw,
another legendary
he fights Iron Man.
Yeah.
The Yellow Claw, off the top of my head, I can't
Captain
think
America.
The Yellow Claw. So then now they flip to villains to try and boost popularity. And then the last in my series, because I'm only doing 10 issues, this is a great cover.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who this villain is. I read these issues when I was a teenager. Definitely worth going through a good read a second time around. I will get to it. But I can select
You can do it. There's only 25 issues.
I can do it. I'll probably get it done in a week, no doubt. So that concludes my Nova character. I love this book. That's why I have all 25. And if he had gone 50 issues, I would have had them all. He was an exciting character, and it's just sad that he didn't take off.
Yeah, I was a big fan too. I also have all 25 issues, and to this day I still don't understand.
And great artwork, as you can see. So we'll kick it over to Pete now with his selection, which is Luke Cage, Power Man, Hero for Hire.
When Bill and I were plotting to do this episode, I had like 3 or 4 characters I was going to do, and I couldn't make up my mind which one I wanted to choose. My first choice was Luke Cage because kind of relevant because of the Netflix show, and the Defenders show is coming out I think next week.
Yep.
So I was like that, but then I was like, oh, but I could pick this character. I had a couple other characters that I was going to choose, but I'm not even going to talk.
Yeah, we'll get into them
we'll
later.
save it for another day. But I figured, you know what, Luke Cage is kind of relevant. It's so I figured.
And he's a good character.
Yeah, he's like, and he's just been, and there's a lot of history here. So Luke Cage was first introduced into the Marvel world in 1972, right? And it's in a rare instance of them giving a brand new character his own book with no exposure whatsoever prior. That doesn't happen that often. So that was in June of 1972. The character was created by Archie Goodwin, Johnny Romita, Ring-a-Ding Romita, and George Tuska. Yeah. And, together...
Classic Iron Man artist, George Tuska.
Yeah, exactly. And, Johnny Romita obviously has worked on all sorts of fantastic stuff. So I didn't pull issue number 1 for today. I tried to pick my favorite, some of my favorite early issues of Luke Cage. I didn't pick number 1 because I've shown you that so many times over the last previous episodes. But here I'm going to show a few. So this one I like. This is number 2, and this was the introduction of the character Diamondback, who is right there. So obviously he was an old friend of Luke Cage.
Get that a little closer.
And again, a little bit of history of Luke Cage. So he was a guy who grew up living in Harlem. He was framed for a crime he didn't commit while he was in prison in Riker, right?
I think it was, yeah.
Riker.
Well, they don't, yeah. They don't go with specific names.
Yeah.
But
he met this kind of scientist who was working at the prison, and he wound up being experimented on, and obviously then he,
got his super strength.
Got all these super strength, bulletproof skin, all that kind of nonsense. He winds up escaping from prison, goes back to Harlem, tries to start a new life. He becomes a hero for hire. He changes his name. His real name is Carl Lucas. He changes it to Luke Cage. So, but anyway, the Diamondback character was actually a childhood friend of his who just really became a bad guy. And if you watch the Netflix series, they go a lot into detail on that. The next issue I'm going to bring out may not be one of the best issues ever, but it's the first ever issue that I bought, and it's actually, I have the original copy.
Sentimental value here.
It's sentimental. So this is the first Luke Cage I ever got, and they released this right around the holidays, and I remember buying this at a local newspaper stand in New York City down on the Lower East Side where my grandparents used to live, and they took me down there. I had 50 cents to spend, and what did I do? I spent 20 of it on issue number 7.
And again, classic artwork. This is probably from 1973. It's 20 center.
Yep.
And
again, it was a holiday issue. So this lunatic here was trying to blow up a bomb on Christmas.
I have
Eve.
that issue as well.
So the next one, we've shown this one in the past, but I still love it.
It's a great villain, classic.
Yeah, number 9,
Dr. Doom.
Dr. Doom against Luke Cage. Again, pretty early in a run to introduce such a famous villain like that, but pretty cool. You're playing the big leagues when you're fighting Dr. Doom, right?
Yeah.
So. Couple issues later, number 12, this was actually a classic Luke Cage villain, and Bill's going to actually fill you in on a little bit of history here with this particular issue. So this is number 10. This is Chemistro.
It's 12, isn't that issue 12?
12, yeah.
Yeah, it's issue 12.
Issue number 12, great cover.
How do you say his name?
Chemistro?
Chemistro? Yeah, he deals with
He's got a gun that shoots some kind of weird...
He can change the elements.
Yeah,
and,
so...
what he's doing here is he shoots the gun on the floor, and it turns the floor to glass. And so the weight of Luke Cage, he falls through it. But I started collecting last year again in early 2016, and I picked up this issue, and then... I was scouting through books, and I found issue 36 of Luke Cage, which I think at that point...
Same villain. Cool, rematch, right?
And then it's a different cover. In fact, I didn't bring it.
It's actually a better cover than this.
And I didn't even think about that because we didn't talk about this, but it's the same story. It's a reprint on the inside. Now, sometimes Marvel did things when they were up against deadlines. They would either reprint covers sometimes, but this time they reprinted the story. Had I known that 36 was a reprint... Usually when I see a book, I don't open it up and look inside. But when I read it, I was like, this story's familiar.
Yeah.
And word for word. But if I had known, I would have not bought issue 36. I'd have bought something different. But because I like Luke Cage, I want to get the whole run, so I bought it anyway. Yeah. But I was disappointed.
But a good story nonetheless.
Hey, but it's ironic that issue 12 and then issue 36 is 2 years later to do a reprint of the same story. That you would think had he gone, you know, they might have did a reprint like maybe issue 100 or something, not 2 years down the line. But anyway,
Deadline Doom, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
Deadline Doom. Up
I
against
think
the wall.
the best for me, the best or worst, depending on how you look at it, Deadline Doom issue was, I think it was Ghost Rider, and I'm probably gonna take heat for saying that the issue wrong, but I think it was 13 or 16, something like that, where he was like fighting the Hulk on the front, and you're like, oh, cool, Ghost Rider versus the Hulk, and you open it up, and it's like a reprint of Ghost Rider's origin.
No
like,
Hulk.
What the hell happened
no
here?
Hulk inside.
No Hulk. So you had to wait till the next issue because again, yeah. So, but it was so late in the publishing process they couldn't even pull the cover. So they literally had to publish it with that cover. Yeah, they went to press. So, and these things happen, I guess. So it's just kind of cool when you own them in your collection. I guess, you know, they work.
Fans pick up on these things, you know.
So on to issue number 19 of Luke Cage Power Man. And here we have the introduction of one of his classic villains, also in the Netflix series. That is Cottonmouth, the gangster from Harlem. All right,
he's like a drug lord.
He's actually a bit cooler in the comic than he was on the Netflix show, but still pretty cool character. And then up to number 21, this was actually pretty neat because for those of you who are a bit older and are into like Marvel lore, there was a villain called Power Man back in the late 60s, early 70s. So here he comes up, and at this point in time, Luke Cage had gone from Luke Cage Hero for Hire to Luke Cage Power Man. So Luke Cage is now here battling the original Power Man. Okay,
like you stole my name.
Yeah. And you know,
I just made that up.
Just.
I did him.
And, you know, again, you know, a little bit of history. So Luke Cage was actually the first Marvel African-American character to get his own solo magazine. There were other characters like the Falcon and Black Panther, and this next one we're going to show who also eventually got their own magazines, but Luke Cage was the first. So here he's fighting Black Goliath, who also had his own comic. Did not run for too long. Did that even go a dozen issues?
I don't remember. I know it wasn't a very long run.
Yeah.
And he was a different character before he became Black Goliath.
Yes.
Goliath, right? I forget who, but he
basically, you know, similar powers like Giant Man. He was kind of like the Giant Man of that mid-late 70s era. So then we're going to go up one more issue to number 25, and you all should be familiar with this crew of villains, the Ringmaster's Circus of Crime. I believe they fought Fantastic Four and Iron Man.
This guy gives me flashbacks of the guy with the whip. He was also in a team where he fought the Hulk in one issue, and like in over post 250s.
Yep.
Yeah, I know him because he's in my collection, the Hulk collection. But I think of Whiplash, the villain that fought Iron Man, when I see that whip. But he's like a Texas rodeo kind of guy with an electrified whip, which is really the limit to his power. He's kind of limited.
They weren't the strongest evil team, the Circus of Crime, but they just popped up all over the place. They were really, you would see them all over the late 60s and early 70s. So now we're going to jump up to issue 48, and it's no longer called Luke Cage anymore. It's just Power Man, and this is a very notable issue. This is the first ever appearance of Iron Fist in a Luke Cage issue. As many of you know, we're going to show you in a second. They later,
closer,
yeah.
There you go.
They
Iron
actually
Fist,
fight
they eventually team up in this book. Eventually, we're going to show you. We might as well bring out the next one, Pete, and show them that eventually the title changes from Power Man to Power Man and Iron Fist.
Yep. Number 50.
They team up, and I'm not sure how long the series went. Did it go over 100 issues?
I believe so.
It was always Power Man and Iron Fist after issue 50.
Yep.
And issue 50 is a milestone issue. So that pretty much concludes this segment of our favorite heroes, I guess you could say.
But we always finish it with favorite covers, right? So, and we're gonna stick to these same characters.
That's right.
And we're gonna look at some other issues that covers that we like.
So for me, back to Nova.
This is a great
because there were 25 issues. This is one of my favorite Nova covers, and it's very similar to issue 4 of the Silver Surfer. And instead of the Silver Surfer, it's almost the same pose, kind of similar. Silver Surfer's flying down out of the sky, but here it's Nova. And again, a great cover for me for a favorite
Jack Kirby cover.
Yes, Mr. Kirby. Another favorite cover. What I love about this one is this is issue 13, and I just love the way this shows off Nova. They're giving really good exposure, and it's a couple of obviously smaller pictures of Nova. Here he's in a death trap, and the Sandman, and I can't read backwards who this guy is. The Crime Buster.
Crime Buster.
But that's kind of a great cover.
But hey,
for me.
Anything with the Sandman is great.
And then the last issue of Nova 25, The final farewell issue. Again, a great cover, great pose, and this wraps up my favorite covers. So I'm giving you 13 out of 25 for Nova.
Good coverage.
Pete, with his favorite covers of Luke Cage coming up right here.
So this one here, again, maybe not one of the best issues, but I always love this cover, and this was one of my original. I think this was the second
one that I need in my collection.
Yeah,
and it would conclude my teens because I have from issues 10 through 20.
Number 15.
I do need 15.
This is the second ever Luke Cage that I bought.
And that's an awesome cover.
It is. This is the
That's
original
really
issue.
cool.
So I actually bought this from the newsstand. This was right from the newsstand right here. And just a great pose, you know.
This one coming up I have as well. This one was one of my, I had two or three in my collection. This is one of my original Luke Cage Power Man.
You can see down here, Iron Man appears in this one. And this is actually an iconic cover, which
I'm
for
looking,
any of you,
where is he? Oh, he's not
guest
on the
star
cover.
the Armored Might. No, he's not on the cover.
I'm looking,
They mention him and don't show him. No, they mention him and don't show him. It's all Luke
It's hard
Cage
to read
here.
backwards.
It is. It is. And if those of you who are into T-shirts, they've actually made this into a T-shirt, so you can actually go out and buy that.
That's a good pose. That is a great cover.
And, you know, this one, again, not one of the greatest issues in the early Luke Cage series, but I always love this cover.
I mentioned two of my originals. Here it is right here, but this is Pete's. Issue 18.
Love what they call this guy again? Steeplejack. Steeplejack. You know, that was the cool thing about the Luke Cage character. Most of his villains were just like normal guys who were like
they weren't like
gangsters.
They weren't as hyped up as like the Green Goblin.
No, they didn't have superpowers, but they were just more like lower, or working.
With the
class
exception
guys.
of that issue Pete showed you with Dr. Doom.
Yeah.
You know, but that pretty much wraps up this episode of Comic Book Geezers. I'm Wild Bill signing out, saying thanks for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Yep,
this is Pete. Have a great one, and I hope you enjoy what we've seen here today with Luke Cage and Nova. We've got a great one coming up next. We're going to go back and do a episode dedicated to just one superhero, and we're going to talk about his Netflix show. Of course, I'm talking about Daredevil. We're going to talk extensively about the Netflix series, and we're going to each one of us are going to talk about some of our favorite Daredevil issues. So stay tuned until next time.
We'll see you then.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.